Hi Spring fans, welcome to another installment of Spring Tips. You know, I struggle with how to make security look fun. I mean, it's satisfying when it's done correctly and elegantly and quickly, but it is fundamentally not. When I write software, there are non-functional requirements, right? Things like scalability, things like elasticity, things like performance, things like observability, and things like scalability that are interesting and important, but not why I'm here. I don't sit down at the keyboard trying to solve those problems. I just need to solve those in order to build something that's worthy of my production environment and worthy, sometimes legally, of my customers. I love things that allow me to get past those things quickly, right? And to that end, I try and cover security as often as possible on this very channel and on my own channel. But again, I want to do so in a way that is elegant, efficient, quick, and amazing. And so Spring Security naturally fits that bill. Spring Security it reduces common security use cases down to often just some configuration and some property files. That's a wonderful place to be if you're a developer trying to build an application destined for production today. One of the things that bedevils so many of our programs today is, how do you log in? How do you authenticate? And it's not so hard for us now with Spring Security as developers to add HTTP basic or form-based login to our application, right? And I'm not talking about from an API perspective, by the way. Right? We know about OAuth and all that, but OAuth is authorization. OAuth tells you it's a delegated authentication. It doesn't do authentication by itself. Authentication is the question of who is accessing this service or this page or this resource. It's not a question of what rights do they have. OAuth only handles what rights do they have. It doesn't handle the, is this Josh, is this Bob, is this Jane, is this whoever. Somebody has to handle that, right? And normally with OAuth, you get forwarded to some other thing, some other page in, for example, the Spring authorization server that does the authentication. And that's usually like form login, right? Well, when you build a regular web app, if you're doing form-based login, or if you're using an OAuth IDP or something, somebody's got to do a login. You've got to log in somewhere, right? That's called authentication. Authentication in of itself is super valuable, but also very difficult, right? Because think about what happens. If you're doing form-based login, if you're doing a username and a password, for us it's easy enough to put that into place from the development side. But what about the users who have to use our software and have to use our systems? They end up with yet another password. And of course, good security policy and posture and hygiene suggests that we should have lots of random, completely different unique passwords for all of our services, and we should use something like a password manager. But how do you log into that password manager? Yeah, you still use your login. You have a username and password usually. But that's changing, and you might have noticed this. It's changing of late in particular. In the last several months, more than almost a year now, you start to see all these large websites, Google and Apple and all these other websites are now providing ways to log in that are not usernames and passwords. The platforms have been doing this for a while. Like on Apple, I can log in with my fingerprint on my MacBook Pro for years and years and years now, right? It's been forever. I don't even remember the last time they didn't have some sort of biometric login. On the phones, on the iPhones and the Androids, there's fingerprint readers and there's face readers and whatever, and some of them may have like eye readers. There's all these biometric sort of login mechanisms. And basically, what's happening is that these readers calculate a hash of your biometric factor, your fingerprint or your iris, the iris of your eye or whatever, and they use that to create a key. And then they can calculate if that key matches, if the private key represented by that factor matches when you try and do another login later on, right? The same thing is possible now on the web. It wasn't really a thing of the web before. It was tied to the hardware which people were using to access these platforms. So I was using my iPhone, so therefore I want to get into my iOS, install in all my apps, I can use my Face ID. But now I want to be able to do the same thing for the web. I'd love to be able to log in to Gmail with my Face ID or with my thumbprint if I'm on my laptop. And the question was, how do I do that? How do I take these really good biometric sort of factors and use them to log in? Or better yet, even if it's not a biometric factor, what if I have a YubiKey, which is like a little USB dongle thing that you can add to a device and then enter a code on that, and then you can take it away from the device, put it in your pocket and take it with you. So even if somebody steals the laptop, they're not going to be able to log into your data unless they have that key and the code that goes with it, right? So this is another example of, I want another factor involved, and I want that factor to be much more portable and also more unique to me, right? By separating the thing that represents the key from the device, you have a really good chance of keeping it more secure. And again, it's just been very difficult to sort of bring that to the web until now. Years ago, the W3C started working on something called the Webauthn, right? This is a core component of the FIDO2 project under the FIDO Alliance. So the FIDO Alliance is a group of companies working together to reduce the world's reliance on passwords. To accomplish this, the FIDO Alliance promotes the development of, the use of, and compliance with standards for authentication and device attestation. That is to say, the device itself, some other device, is saying this is who you think it is, right? And it's usually by doing some sort of challenge on the device itself, like a Face ID, like a thumbprint, whatever. So the Webauthn is the standardization of those efforts, and the goal of the project is to standardize the interface for authenticating users for web-based applications and services using public key cryptography. Webauthn credentials, which are themselves FIDO credentials, are sometimes referred to as passkeys. Okay. So on the client side, Webauthn can be implemented in a variety of ways. The underlying cryptographic operations are performed by an authenticator, which is, a means to confirm a user's identity to perform digital authentication. A person authenticates to a computer system or application by demonstrating that he or she is in possession and control of an authenticator. In the simplest case, an authenticator is just a common, like a fingerprint or whatever. So it makes it, so this describes how a web service is supposed to prompt and then consume that whole process, right? And obviously this relies on support in the browsers. The browsers need to have the APIs to then prompt you for this authentication to show you the right screen, and that has to in turn be aware of what's happening in the operating system. So there's a lot of native code that has to be done here that goes well beyond just what you and I can do out in the context of a HTML HTTP based application. And also the thing that you're using is separate from the thing that you're authenticating on, right? So my finger, you can't hack my finger. It's my finger. It's always going to be my finger. No manner of phishing or malware will ever get you that value, right, that you need to be able to provide and then duplicate that. Likewise, an UBI key, right, which is one of those USB-C dongles about which I just spoke, if you install a virus on the laptop I'm using to authenticate, you still don't have the value. You don't have the actual factor itself, the key. So this is a very, very nice thing because it's actually, first of all, hopefully easier for the user, and it's markedly more secure, right? And it's also less things to know about, right? I would love it if everybody installed a password manager, but again, that is just a level of software hygiene that I just don't think most people are going to have, right? So having biometric-based authentication, I think, is a really good idea, and it's becoming more and more popular thanks, again, like I say, to the FIDO Alliance. The Alliance has a lot of support here, okay? Obviously the browsers have to be on board, and they are, but also in terms of who's supporting it and contributing to it and working on it, huge companies. Look at this. You got 1Password, of course, speaking of password managers, Amazon, American Express, Apple. You've got, this is, what is this bank? Bank of America, Cisco, pharmacy here, you've got Google, you've got Dell Computers, you've got Microsoft, you've got Facebook, MasterCard, you've got NTT Docomo in Japan, you've got Qualcomm, Samsung, you've got PayPal, right? I mean, Visa, Wells Fargo, another bank, Ubico. You've got huge companies. Another bank, Chase. You've got DocuSign, right? You can use that to digitally sign documents on the internet right now. Another bank, HSBC, IBM Security, JCB. I mean, huge companies. eBay, right? All these companies. Mozilla, the browser, Red Hat, Rakuten in Japan, Okta, the security company, Twilio, my goodness, Yahoo. All these companies are invested in making this work. Oh, SoftBank, one of the biggest banks in the world, also in Japan. They're all invested in making this work. It's not just, wouldn't it be nice? It's these companies are already shipping it. They're already involved in it. They're already deploying it. They're working on it. They have a sense that this is a better idea. And so they're supporting it. You can see it all around you right now, right? I've set up passkeys on GitHub, on Apple, on Gmail, on a number of things. And that means that if I log into a device that has my iCloud account, and that iCloud account in turn has a passkey stored with it, I can use that passkey on the device where it's appropriate to log in, right? I don't need to have a password manager. In theory, I could set up a brand new Mac OS, log in with iCloud, and then just log into GitHub with my thumbprint. So what does it look like for us to implement that? Well, it's not there. We're not there yet. It's not 100% there yet, but they are working on it. And by they, I mean the Spring Security team, led of course by the wonderful, the amazing, the inimitable Rob Winch. And there's actually a branch of the code that Rob has on his GitHub repository right now that kind of has a very rough sketch of what that stuff looks like. It's not a separate library yet. You can't really try it out. What I've done is I've taken this code and I was guided by my friend Daniel Gagne-Moirot, who's been on the podcast recently, and with whom I did a presentation at Devoxx France introducing Webauthn and Passkeys. And we took that code and sort of extracted it out into a separate library and a demo. Okay, and the library I installed on my local machine. So I'll put this code on github.com spring-tips, of course, and it'll be something related to Passkeys or Webauthn or something. But basically, I took that code, we extracted it out into a separate module, and then I installed it into my local Maven repository. So again, it's not even in a snapshot repo under the Spring projects yet, but it's really interesting, and I want you to try it out and kind of feedback, right? If you have issues, use cases, whatever, we'd love to hear about this. I don't think this is going to ship in the next Spring Security release coming very soon, but instead I think in the next major one after that, probably in 6-ish months. So this is a good time to sound off, okay? And this is demonstrating Webauthn from the perspective of a Spring Security application. So in this build, we installed it locally, org Spring Framework Security, Spring Security Webauthn, and the version is 001-rwinch. These are not the versions that Rob Winch specified in his original one, right? And by the way, this branch under Rob's GitHub repository, you can see work dating back 4 years ago, right? So he's been working on this, noodling on it for a long time. And the branch that we care about is, I think, the Passkeys one. Is that the more recent one, 2 months ago? I'm not sure if that's the right one or if it's this one, but either, I think let's just say it's Passkeys. And that one in turn has just example Webauthn 001 snapshot. So you can see where we are. Very, very early days yet, and yet still remarkably good results because the hard part is already done. So let's go ahead and try it out on my local machine. I've already got this installed, and we're going to build an application as always by going to start.spring.io, and I'm just going to bring in Java 21. I use Maven. I'm just going to call this Passkeys. Okay, so there's that, and beautiful. Okay, hit generate. Maybe I should have used the web support. Maybe I should do that as well. So let me go delete this, hit generate again. Okay, UAO passkeys.zip. Okay, pretty straightforward. We got a public static void main application. I'm going to use this custom, not standard, not published, not official, not GA version of Rob's amazing work. Super early days yet, but I think still well worth a look. Spring Security Webauthn, org Spring Framework Security 001-rwinch. And again, this is using the build that I have in my Git repository, not in Rob's. Rob's is actually just one application that acts as both a demo and the implementation, right? It's just so he can make it easier to iterate and move quickly. But I've separated it out into a library that we can add to another Spring Boot app in my repository. Don't count on any of this staying the way it is in the final thing. Just super important to remember that. But okay, that's all there. You notice that I didn't bring in Spring Security because, of course, this brings in Spring Security. So I can trust that to be what it needs to be as well. And then that's basically the hard part. Now we just need to set up our passkeys. So we're going to set up a default security filter chain like this. Okay. I'm going to say return http dot we need HTTP security. Okay. Never let AI drive your code. I just realized that. Authorize HTTP requests. Okay. A.request matchers login. Okay. And this will be permit all. But otherwise, any request has to be authenticated, yeah? And then finally, we want to build it like that, okay? And then we want to configure the passkey support itself. So all of this is so far just Spring Security stuff that you've no doubt become familiar with, right? So we also need to handle the exception that might get thrown, okay? So we need a custom configurer. So we'll use with new Webauthn configure. And here we go, we'll configure, we have a builder and the context, and then we need to configure a few things here, okay? RPID is the local host, because that's the client basically. And then we have the RP name, which is arbitrary, so Webauthn Passkeys, all right? And then allow origins is going to be, you know, my host and port, so localhost 8080. And that's it. Now you can imagine that when this is done, once it's GA and it's landed in the project, they'll probably have some sort of Webauthn method or something like that, right? You don't have to use this fall through escape hatch as we're doing here. So we've got our configuration, and now what? Well, we can just create a simple HTTP endpoint just to prove that everything is as we expected. Okay, and we'll call this hello, new handler function, and new server response dot okay dot body, and we need the current authenticated user, of course. So request dot get, and so we want the current authenticated user. So user equals security context holder dot get context holder strategy dot get context dot get authentication dot get name. Okay, so we're going to say map dot of message hello name. Okay, and that's going to be user. Voila. Okay, there's our very simple HTTP endpoint. Replace that with a lambda. Very good. We got almost everything, but we also need form login. Otherwise, you know, because they have to log in somehow the first time, right? Otherwise, you can't log in. You need to log in with something. So I need to also set up users, right? So we'll do user details service, and we'll do a new in-memory user details manager. And by the way, you could also do this in properties. You could say, you know, security username password blah, and do a username, etc. What is it called? User.name, and do that. But I'm just going to do an in-memory user database, right? So the idea is that we're going to have users, and then we're going to associate them with this biometric factor, my fingerprint. Okay, so user dot with username, I'm going to call this jlong password, and then the password, you know, we have to encode it, so I'll encode it using the Spring Framework's password encoder. Okay, and then pw, but okay, and we want the roles user. There you go. Okay, so I've got now these credentials plugged in. Good. So now I'm going to restart the application. I've got the login for form login, so that I can log in the very first time, so that I can then go through the process of registering the factor. I've got the auth-in support. I've exempted the login page itself for like login, right? So login, and I've set up a user called jlong, and you could, you know, it's got the role user, password is pw, jlong is username. Obviously, this password should not be hard coded in Java code. You should store it from something else, like Vault or a encrypted database or whatever. Okay, let's go ahead and restart it and check it out and see what happens. It's complaining I don't have a password encoder. That is fair, I don't. Okay, here we go. Return password dot create delegating password encoder. Here we go. It's up and running. Let's go ahead and try it out. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to do an incognito window. Localhost, remember, it's got to be the same domain as the one you specified in the configuration there. It's going to say, do you want to log in? I do. So I'm going to go ahead and jlong pw sign in. Good, I'm registered, I'm authenticated. What about our endpoint? Hello. There it is, that's working great. So we go back here. Now I want to register a passkey, because again, it wasn't so bad to log in with the username and password, but I don't want to do that that's the whole point, right? So register a passkey, okay. And now I need to specify the passkey label, so I'll just call this Webauthn. I'll hit register, and now it's asking, do you want to use Touch ID to sign in? A passkey for jlong will be saved to your iCloud keychain and available on all your devices. So you can't really see this, but off screen, I'm going to take my finger and touch the sensor, registering a passkey. Okay, let me make this font normal sized. There you go. And you can see I've registered it here. There's actually a repository behind the scenes, but I'm just using the in-memory variant of all this stuff, of course. So there you go. So now I've got this. Let's go ahead and log out and try this again. Okay, do I want to log out? You better believe it, I do. Here we go. Logged out. So now I want to sign in again, but this time with a passkey. Okay, so now it's going to ask me, do I want to sign in with a passkey? I'm going to go back to my thumb fingerprint reader thing over here on my laptop. Ta-da! And now I'm back logged in, And by the way, the nice thing about this is if I had, you can actually use other devices here, right? So in this case, I only had that one set up, but if I had a YubiKey in my USB port, it would ask me if I wanted to use that to register the passkey. On different devices, if you have different kind of biometric factors that are available, it'll show you, and you can actually list all of them. Now you might be wondering, where on a Mac, at least, do I go to delete or work with these passwords? Well, it's not great. You actually have to go to Safari. If you're on a Mac, you have to go into Safari and go to the password section, and then go to localhost and delete those, right? So if I click on this, it's going to say I've got a passkey here created today, right? So I need to delete that passkey. And the problem, of course, is this is true even if you're doing it for Firefox or Google Chrome or whatever. So I'm hoping this will get this shouldn't be in Safari. It makes no sense, right? Each browser shouldn't have to manage this at all. In fact, I think this is one of those things where, since it's an operating system interaction, ideally it'd be centralized at least so that I can delete and register and create these passkeys. But okay, there you go. So there's our pretty simple application. The result of using this is better security. And it's easier. I didn't have to type in the password for my password manager. I got a very unique key, right? That's nice. I like uniqueness here, and it's easier, like I said. And if you're using something like iCloud or Google's services, they can federate this. So I have it available across multiple devices too, right? I can log in to this website on 2 different Macs without having to register a new passkey, right? That's the idea, at least. So it's just a really good result for everybody. It's also, you can see it wasn't so bad to add, and it'll get even less invasive eventually. Now, what does this mean for something like the auth server? Well, remember what I said earlier. Auth server is delegated authentication. It doesn't do the authentication itself. So in theory, one day, soon hopefully, you'll be able to redirect to the auth server, register a passkey there, for authentication. It'll get tied to your identity. For JLong is there on the auth server, and you logged in and created a passkey. Now, any of your protected web apps and microservices will use OAuth. They'll redirect to your auth server. You do the passkey authentication, and they generate an OAuth token and then send you back to the service that you're trying to access. Right? So imagine now you can protect a single with just a bit of configuration. You can protect a whole suite of services in one, and you have to register the authentication just once in the auth server, and then that authentication itself is just a fingerprint. I mean, it's just a really good result for everybody. So it's not quite here yet, but I want you to try it out, and if you have questions, concerns, whatever, let the Spring Security team know, or maybe let the FIDO Alliance know. It's not entirely within our control, obviously, but I'm really excited about what I'm seeing here. Again, special thanks to Rob Winch for doing 99% of the work, and then Daniel Gagne-Moreau for doing the other 1%, and then to you, everybody, for hanging out and learning with me. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.